The moment my son held up his diploma and dedicated it to me in front of 500 people, half my family walked out. But what they didn't know was that this pity pass graduate had just been accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship. I never thought a high school graduation could break a family apart, but mine did. My name is Sarah, and I'm about to tell you the story of how one moment on a graduation stage silenced the people who spent 18 years telling me I was a failure as a mother. You see, when you're a single mom at 19, everyone becomes an expert on your life. Everyone has an opinion about your choices, your parenting, and especially your kids' future. My family was no different. Actually, they were worse. Let me introduce you to the players in this story because you need to understand the dynamics that made this moment so powerful. First, there's my son Marcus. He's 18 now. But when he was 8 years old, his teacher pulled me aside after class. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "I think Marcus might have some learning differences. Have you considered having him tested?" That's when our real journey began. Marcus was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. Suddenly, homework that should take 30 minutes was taking 3 hours. Parent-teacher conferences became monthly events. I watched other parents pick up their kids after school activities while I was sitting in tutoring sessions, advocacy meetings, and specialist appointments. But Marcus never gave up. Even when reading felt impossible, even when math problems seemed to swim around on the page, he kept trying. He'd look at me with those determined brown eyes and say, "Mom, I'm going to make you proud someday." And I'd hug him tight and tell him he already did. Then there's my sister Rebecca, 4 years older than me, married to Frank, a successful attorney. Rebecca lives in a world of country club memberships, private school fundraisers, and vacation homes. She's the one who made it, the one who did everything right. Graduated college, married well, had kids at the appropriate time. Rebecca has a daughter, Jessica, who's also 18. Jessica attends Westfield Prep, where tuition costs more than I make in 6 months. She's valedictorian, captain of the debate team, and headed to Princeton in the fall. Rebecca never misses an opportunity to remind me of Jessica's achievements, usually followed by a sympathetic head tilt and questions about how Marcus is managing in regular public school. Frank, Rebecca's husband, is the kind of man who measures success in billable hours and property values. He speaks in that careful lawyer tone, the one where insults sound like observations. "Some children are naturally gifted," he'd say, looking at Marcus struggling with his homework. "Others need to find alternative paths." Alternative paths. That was their code for "your kid isn't smart enough." Then there's my mother, Linda. At 67, she's caught in the middle of her 2 daughters' very different lives. She loves us both, but I can see the worry in her eyes when she looks at me, the concern about my future, my finances, my choices. She never says it directly, but I know she wonders if Rebecca's path might have been easier, better, more stable. For 18 years, I've been the cautionary tale at family gatherings, the daughter who could have been something if she'd just made better choices, the mother who was trying her best, with a child who faced challenges. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what nobody in my family understood. While they were whispering about pity passes and backup plans, Marcus was quietly becoming something extraordinary. Not despite his learning differences, but because of what they taught him about perseverance, empathy, and fighting for what you want. The day of graduation, I sat in those bleachers wearing my best dress, the one I'd been saving for special occasions. I watched my family members file in, Rebecca in her designer outfit, Frank checking his phone constantly, my mother nervously adjusting her purse strap. They were there out of obligation, not celebration. They had no idea that in 20 minutes their assumptions about my son, about me, about our entire future were about to crumble on that graduation stage. They came expecting to witness a participation trophy moment. Instead, they were about to witness the moment that proved 18 years of doubt, criticism, and condescension completely wrong. Let me take you back to where this all started, because understanding our journey makes what happened at graduation even more incredible. I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant with Marcus. I was a sophomore at State University, studying elementary education with dreams of becoming a teacher. I had a 3.7 GPA and a scholarship that covered most of my tuition. But when that pink line appeared on the pregnancy test, everything changed. The father disappeared before I even told him. One day he was talking about our future together. The next day his phone went straight to voicemail, and his roommate told me he'd transferred schools. I was completely alone, facing the biggest decision of my life. My family's reaction was exactly what you'd expect. Rebecca sat me down in her perfectly decorated living room and laid out what she called realistic options. Adoption agencies, she said, could handle everything discreetly. I could finish school, get my life back on track, and learn from this mistake. When I told her I wanted to keep the baby, she looked at me like I'd announced I was dropping out to join the circus. "Sarah," she said in that patient tone she uses when she thinks someone's being stupid, "you're throwing your life away. You have no idea how hard this is going to be." But I couldn't give up my baby. Something inside me knew that this child was meant to be mine, and I was meant to be his mother. So I dropped out of college, moved back home with my mom, and prepared for the hardest 18 years of my life. Marcus was born on a Tuesday morning in October, weighing 6 pounds and 2 ounces. The moment I held him, I knew I'd made the right choice. But the real challenges were just beginning. Money was always tight. I worked at Danny's Diner during the day, serving coffee and taking orders from people my age who were finishing college while I was changing diapers. At night, I cleaned office buildings downtown, vacuuming cubicles and emptying trash cans, while Marcus slept in his carrier beside my cleaning cart. Some nights, the security guards would let me bring him inside when it was too cold to leave him in the car. The family gatherings were the worst part. Every holiday, every birthday party became a reminder of what my life could have been. Rebecca would talk about Jessica's piano lessons, her advanced placement classes, her acceptance to gifted programs. Then the conversation would turn to Marcus, and the tone would shift. "How's school going for him?" they'd ask with that careful concern in their voices. When Marcus was 8 and started struggling with reading, I knew something was different. Words seemed to jump around on the page for him. He'd spend hours on homework that other kids finished in 20 minutes. I'd sit at our kitchen table every night, helping him sound out words, watching him get frustrated and tired. "Maybe he's just not ready," Rebecca suggested when I mentioned having him tested. "Some children develop slower than others." But I fought for him. I researched learning differences, found specialists, and advocated for accommodations at school. When the diagnosis came back dyslexia and ADHD, I felt relief. Finally, we had answers. Finally, we had a plan. My family felt differently. Frank started making comments about labels and excuses. Rebecca would sigh and say things like, "Well, not every child is college material. Maybe he'll be good with his hands." Through it all, Marcus and I became an unbreakable team. On nights when homework felt impossible, we'd take breaks to dance in our tiny apartment kitchen. When other kids made fun of him for reading slowly, I'd remind him that his brain just worked differently, not worse. When I came home exhausted from double shifts, he'd have attempted to make dinner, usually resulting in burned grilled cheese and a mess that took an hour to clean up. "Mom," he told me one night when he was 15, after overhearing Rebecca make another comment about his limitations, "I'm going to make you proud someday. I'm going to show them they were wrong about both of us." I believed him because I had to. Because when you're fighting the world together, believing in each other is all you have. What I didn't know was that Marcus was already working on a plan that would prove just how wrong they all were. The breaking point came 2 weeks before Marcus's graduation, at what should have been a celebration. My mother, Linda, was turning 67, and she'd insisted on having the whole family over for dinner. I should have known it would turn into another opportunity for Rebecca to showcase her perfect life while highlighting everything wrong with mine. I spent my grocery money on a nice birthday gift for Mom and bought a new blouse from the clearance rack, wanting to look put together for once. Marcus offered to skip his tutoring session to come with me, but I told him to stay home and study. I wish now that I'd brought him. Maybe having him there would have changed how cruel they were willing to be. Rebecca had outdone herself, arriving with an elaborate flower arrangement and a designer handbag for Mom. She was practically glowing as she announced that Jessica had been named valedictorian at Westfield Prep. "Can you believe it?" she gushed, showing everyone photos on her phone. "The headmaster said she's one of the most promising students they've ever had." Frank puffed up with pride. "Princeton's lucky to get her." though with her test scores and our connections, she could have gone anywhere. The conversation naturally turned to graduation celebrations. Rebecca started describing the elaborate party she was planning at the Riverside Country Club. "We've booked the entire ballroom," she said, scrolling through party planning photos. "Catered dinner for 200 guests, live band, professional photographer. Frank's partners are flying in from Chicago just for the occasion." "That sounds lovely, dear," Mom said, clearly impressed. "Well, Jessica deserves it," Rebecca replied. 18 years of straight A's, student council president, varsity tennis captain. This is what happens when you invest in your child's education from day one. The dig was subtle, but unmistakable. I felt my stomach clench, but I forced a smile. "That's wonderful. Jessica's worked really hard." "Speaking of graduations," Frank said, turning to me with that calculated look he gets when he's about to say something cutting, "Marcus is graduating this year too, isn't he?" "Yes," I said proudly. "Next Friday. We're really excited." Rebecca's eyebrows went up. "Are you planning some kind of celebration?" "Nothing fancy," I admitted. "Just a small party at our apartment. Maybe some cake and pizza with a few friends." The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca and Frank exchanged one of their looks, the kind married couples develop when they communicate entire conversations without words. "Sarah," Rebecca said finally, her voice dripping with fake concern, "are you seriously throwing him a party?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Of course I am. It's his graduation." "But honey," she continued, tilting her head in that patronizing way I'd grown to hate, "he's barely passing. Everyone knows it's just a pity pass so the school can get rid of him." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not true. Marcus has worked incredibly hard." Frank leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass. "Let's be realistic here," he said in his measured attorney voice. "The boy struggles with basic academics. These public schools, they just push kids through the system regardless of actual achievement." "Marcus earned his diploma," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Rebecca sighed dramatically. "Sarah, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to be realistic. He'll probably end up at community college for a semester before dropping out entirely. Why pretend this graduation means anything significant?" "Some families are just meant for different paths," Frank added quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Like mother, like son. Not everyone is cut out for academic success." The room went completely silent. Even Mom looked uncomfortable, staring down at her untouched birthday cake. I felt tears building behind my eyes, the familiar burn of humiliation and rage. "Marcus has overcome more in 18 years than Jessica has ever had to face," I managed to say. "Overcome what?" Rebecca laughed. "Having learning disabilities isn't some kind of achievement, Sarah. It's just an explanation for why he can't keep up." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "I need to go." "Don't be dramatic," Rebecca called after me as I grabbed my purse. "We're just being honest about the situation." I drove home in tears, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. But what broke my heart most wasn't what they'd said about me. It was what they'd said about Marcus, my brilliant, determined, incredible son who had never given up despite everything. That night, I thought I was crying quietly in my room. I had no idea Marcus was listening outside my door, hearing every word as I told my best friend what had happened. I had no idea that their cruelty had just lit a fire in my son that would change everything. What I didn't know that night, as I cried myself to sleep after that horrible dinner, was that Marcus had heard every word of my phone call to my best friend, Jenny. While I thought he was in his room doing homework, he was actually standing in the hallway listening to me repeat Rebecca's cruel words about pity passes and Frank's comment about us being academic failures. The next morning, Marcus seemed different, more determined, more focused. He left for school earlier than usual and came home later, claiming he had extra study sessions. I was proud that he was working so hard in these final weeks, but I had no idea what he was really planning. "Mrs. Rodriguez wants to see you after school tomorrow," he told me casually over dinner 3 days after the birthday incident. Mrs. Rodriguez was Marcus's guidance counselor, the woman who'd been our advocate for 4 years. She'd helped secure his accommodations, found him tutors, and always believed in his potential when others didn't. Is everything okay? I asked, immediately worried. Are your grades slipping? Marcus shook his head, giving me that mysterious smile that reminded me of when he was little and planning. Surprise Mother's Day gifts. Just trust me, Mom. She wants to discuss some options for next year. The next afternoon, I sat nervously in Mrs. Rodriguez's small office, surrounded by college posters and motivational quotes. Marcus sat beside me, unusually calm for someone who typically fidgeted during these meetings. Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Rodriguez began, her eyes bright with excitement. I asked you here because Marcus has something incredible to share, but he wanted you to hear it from both of us. She pulled out a thick folder from her desk drawer. For the past 2 years, Marcus has been working with me on something special, college applications. My mouth fell open. College applications? But we never discussed. Because I wanted it to be a surprise, Marcus interrupted, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. Mom, remember when you used to tell me that just because my brain works differently doesn't mean it works worse? I nodded, tears already forming. Well, I decided to prove that, not just to myself, but to everyone who ever doubted us. Mrs. Rodriguez opened the folder and spread out documents across her desk. Marcus's grades improved dramatically over the past 2 years. His GPA for junior and senior year combined is 3.8. He's been taking community college courses online to challenge himself beyond what the high school offered. I stared at the transcripts in shock. How did I not know about this? Because you were working 2 jobs to support us, Marcus said gently. I didn't want to add pressure. I studied during lunch, stayed after school, worked with tutors Mrs. Rodriguez connected me with, and I wrote my college essay about you. Mrs. Rodriguez handed me a printed document. Would you like to read it? With shaking hands, I read the title. The woman who taught me that failure isn't falling down, it's staying down. The essay described our journey together, from the nights I cleaned offices with him sleeping in his carrier, to the kitchen table homework sessions that lasted until midnight, to the way I fought for his accommodations when others wanted to give up on him. This essay, combined with his academic improvement and community service work, caught the attention of several universities, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. Community service? I asked weakly. Marcus grinned. I've been tutoring younger kids with learning differences at the community center every Saturday for the past year. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me set it up. But the real news, Mrs. Rodriguez said, reaching for an official-looking envelope, came yesterday. Marcus took the envelope with trembling hands. Mom, Stanford University has accepted me with a full academic scholarship. The world stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was hearing. Full scholarship, I whispered. Based on academic merit, his essay and his commitment to helping other students with learning differences, Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed. They want him in their education program. He's going to study to become a special education teacher. I started crying right there in that tiny office, ugly sobs of pride and shock and overwhelming joy. Marcus wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time in years, I felt like we'd won. But here's the best part, Mom, Marcus whispered in my ear. I want to announce it at graduation. I want everyone who ever doubted us to hear it. Especially Rebecca and Frank. That's when I knew my son hadn't just earned a diploma. He'd planned the perfect revenge. Graduation day arrived with perfect blue skies, the kind of weather that makes everything feel possible. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror adjusting the navy dress I'd bought specifically for this day. It wasn't designer like Rebecca's clothes, but it was mine, and I felt proud wearing it. Marcus had left early for final rehearsal, but not before giving me the tightest hug and whispering, "Today changes everything, Mom. Just trust me." The gymnasium was packed with families, the air buzzing with excitement and the flash of cameras. I spotted my family immediately. Rebecca sat in her perfectly coordinated outfit, checking her phone. Frank looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, constantly glancing at his watch. Mom sat between them, nervously clutching her purse. I chose a seat in the front row, directly in their line of sight. If they were going to judge my son, they were going to have to look me in the eye while they did it. The ceremony began with the usual speeches about bright futures and endless possibilities. I watched Marcus in his cap and gown, sitting straight and alert with his graduating class. He kept catching my eye and smiling, and each time my heart swelled with pride. Principal Williams began calling names alphabetically. Each graduate walked across the stage, shook hands, received their diploma, and moved their tassel from right to left. Simple, efficient, routine. Then they called Marcus Thompson. My son stood up, and something was different about the way he walked to that stage. There was confidence in his steps, purpose in his posture. Instead of the quick handshake and exit I expected, Marcus paused at the podium. "Excuse me," he said into the microphone, his voice clear and strong. "May I say something?" A murmur went through the crowd. Principal Williams looked surprised but nodded. Marcus looked directly at me, his eyes bright with emotion. "I want to dedicate this diploma to my mom, Sarah Thompson." My heart stopped. This wasn't part of the plan we'd discussed. "Mom," his voice carried across the silent gymnasium, "this is for every time they said you failed. This is for every night you worked 2 jobs so I could have what I needed. This is for every time you sat at our kitchen table, helping me with homework that took me 3 times longer than other kids. This is for every meeting where you fought for my accommodations when teachers wanted to give up on me." Tears were streaming down my face now, and I could hear other people in the audience sniffling. "But most importantly," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, "this is for every time they said I couldn't make it, that I was just getting a pity pass, that our family wasn't meant for academic success." The silence in that room was deafening. I could feel Rebecca and Frank's eyes burning into the back of my head. "Because, Mom," Marcus said, holding up his diploma, "I have an announcement. Stanford University has offered me a full academic scholarship to study education. I'm going to become a special education teacher, so I can help other kids like me, and maybe someday you can finish that teaching degree you gave up to raise me." The gymnasium exploded. 500 people leaped to their feet in thunderous applause. I was sobbing so hard I could barely see, but I stood up and clapped until my hands hurt. The other graduates were cheering, parents were wiping their eyes, and the noise was overwhelming and beautiful. Through my tears, I turned to look at my family. Mom was on her feet, clapping and crying. But Rebecca and Frank sat frozen in their seats, their faces pale with shock. Rebecca's mouth was literally hanging open. Frank was staring at Marcus like he was seeing a ghost. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Marcus stood on that stage, holding his diploma high, his face radiant with joy and vindication. This was his moment, his triumph, his proof that every doubt and criticism had been wrong. That's when I saw it happen. Rebecca grabbed her purse and whispered something harsh to Frank. He nodded grimly, and they both stood up. While the entire auditorium celebrated my son's incredible achievement, while people cheered for his success and our journey, my sister and brother-in-law quietly slipped out the side exit. They couldn't handle being wrong. They couldn't face the fact that the failure family had just proved that determination and love matter more than money and privilege. As the applause finally died down and Marcus walked off the stage, I realized something profound. We didn't need their approval anymore. We never had. We had already won. The silence in our apartment that evening was different from any silence we'd ever shared. It wasn't the exhausted quiet after a long day of work and school, or the worried hush of financial stress. This was the peaceful silence of victory, of vindication, of finally being able to breathe freely. Marcus had changed out of his cap and gown and was sitting on our old couch, his diploma propped up on the coffee table next to a photo of us from his 8th grade graduation. In that picture, he looked uncertain, still struggling with reading, still fighting to prove himself. The young man sitting beside me now radiated confidence. "I can't believe you kept all of this secret," I said for the 10th time, still shaking my head in amazement. "I learned from the best," he replied, squeezing my hand. "You kept working 2 jobs secret from me for years so I wouldn't feel guilty. You made sacrifices look easy so I could focus on school." Our small graduation party was supposed to start at 7. I'd invited Marcus's tutors, Mrs. Rodriguez, a few close friends from work, and some of his classmates. I'd also invited my family, though after this afternoon I wasn't sure who would show up. The first knock came at exactly 7 o'clock. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with a beautiful bouquet and tears still in her eyes from the ceremony. "I've been a guidance counselor for 23 years, she said, hugging Marcus tightly, and I have never been more proud of a student." Marcus's tutor, Mr. Chen, came next, followed by Jenny from work and her teenage son who Marcus had helped with math. Then came a surprise. 3 of Marcus's classmates who'd heard about Stanford and wanted to congratulate him personally. By 8 o'clock, our tiny apartment was full of laughter, genuine celebration, and people who had believed in us all along. But the people who were missing spoke volumes. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Mom, proud of you both. Rebecca and Frank had to leave early. Work emergency." Work emergency on a Friday night at a graduation. Jenny caught me looking at my phone with a sad expression. "They didn't come?" "Rebecca and Frank left during the ceremony," I explained, right after Marcus announced Stanford. "Their loss," said Mr. Chen firmly. "That boy is going to change the world." Around 9 o'clock, there was another knock at the door. I opened it to find my mother, holding a wrapped gift and looking sheepish. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said quietly. "I had to have a conversation with your sister." She hugged Marcus fiercely. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart, and I owe you and your mother an apology." "Grandma, you don't." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "I let Rebecca's opinions influence how I saw your struggles. I should have stood up for you both years ago. I should have celebrated every small victory instead of worrying about every challenge." She turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, you did something I couldn't do. You believed in your child when everyone else gave up. You fought for him when it would have been easier to accept what others said. You're the mother I should have been to you." That night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were washed, Marcus and I sat on our couch looking at college brochures and his acceptance letter. Stanford wanted him to start in the fall semester. Housing was covered, tuition was covered, even textbooks were included in his scholarship. "Mom," he said suddenly, "I meant what I said about you finishing your teaching degree." "Marcus, that was 18 years ago. I'm 37 now." "So?" "Mrs. Rodriguez told me about adult learning programs. You could do it online while I'm at Stanford. We could both graduate together, you with your education degree, me with mine." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. What if I can't do it? What if I'm too old, too rusty? Marcus smiled, the same determined smile I'd seen on the graduation stage. "Mom, you taught me that being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means it's worth doing." 6 months later, I enrolled in an online teaching program. Marcus sends me his study schedules from Stanford, and we have virtual study sessions every Sunday. Rebecca and Frank never apologized, never acknowledged Marcus's achievement. But here's what I learned. Their silence speaks louder than any apology ever could. Some people will never admit when they're wrong about you, but that doesn't make their opinions true. Marcus is thriving at Stanford, maintaining a 3.9 GPA and tutoring other students with learning differences. He calls me every night to tell me about his classes, his professors, and his plans to revolutionize special education. And me? I'm 3 semesters away from finally earning that teaching degree I started 19 years ago. We both learned that the only approval that matters is the approval you give yourself. Everything else is just noise. If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Sometimes the people who doubt us the most are the ones closest to us, but that doesn't mean their doubts define our destiny. Sarah and Marcus proved that determination, love, and refusing to give up can overcome any obstacle. Maybe you're fighting your own battles right now. Maybe someone in your family has told you that you're not smart enough, not capable enough, or that your dreams are unrealistic. I want you to remember Marcus standing on that graduation stage, holding up his Stanford acceptance letter, proving that every person who doubted him was wrong. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, your potential isn't limited by their lack of vision, and your success doesn't require their permission. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to prove doubters wrong? What's your biggest victory against the odds? Share your story because someone else might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. We share real-life stories about overcoming adversity, family drama, and finding strength you never knew you had. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their dreams are valid no matter what anyone else says. Sometimes we all need a reminder that the only voice that truly matters is the one that believes in us. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story isn't over yet. The best chapters might still be waiting to be written. Until next time, keep believing in yourself. You've got this.